All right, so I'm gonna go ahead. Okay, so, and I'm recording, but I have your video blocked, just FYI, so that you can have
Oh,
it afterwards too if you want it.
awesome. Okay. Okay.
So, physicists are often asked why the image of an object, such as a chair, appears reversed left to right rather than, say, top to bottom when viewed in a mirror. Okay, so people ask physicists why the chair is like why does a mirror show us like left to right rather than top to bottom? Okay. Their answer is simply that an image viewed in a mirror appears reversed about the axis around which the viewer rotates his or her field of sight and turning from the object to its reflected image. Okay, so the reason that this happens is because um the mirror reverses it based upon like our axis of how we're viewing it. So how we're viewing it must be why it's causing it to go left to right. That is, the reversal in question is relative to the position and orientation of the observer when the object is viewed directly. Okay, that makes sense then, based on what we just read. Since we ordinarily rotate our field of sight about a vertical axis, we ordinarily rotate our field of sight about a vertical axis, mirror images usually appear reversed left to right. This is the field of sight explanation. Okay, so we normally rotate our field of sight around a vertical axis. So the vertical axis must be what's causing the mirror to be left to right. And this explanation of how physicists are explaining this is the field of sight explanation. Did you gather all that the first time you read it?
So, do you highlight
No,
ever?
I don't, but some people do. I don't highlight.
Okay.
I
So,
can though. Jazz
oh, it's fine. I was just wondering, like, if it's some people highlight, some people don't. I get like,
did not. I stopped highlighting because I was someone that highlighted and I used it as a crutch to not pay attention.
yeah,
And so like I really worked on engaging. I do think that there can be value to highlighting, but I think there's also value to at least practicing sometimes not highlighting and just working your brain, like I say, like brain exercises where you're
yeah,
forcing your brain to, I call it sitting on a sentence rather like, because I think when we highlight something, we think, oh, I'm highlighting this so I remember it, but we don't really like engage our brain and remember it.
yeah. So I did not get the way that you read it. They talked about the seeing things from a vertical. So that's why things appear from left to right, and this left to right, reversed left to right is the field of sight explanation. So what I was had to pay attention was that it's called the field of sight explanation. Is that what I'm supposed to get from this?
Yeah.
Okay. An explanation of what is the field of sight.
Yes. In the field of explanation is how the physicists respond to this question, right?
Mhm.
Which is everything.
View- Viewing a mirror. Okay.
Yes. All right, I'm going to
Okay.
do the next sentence and then you're going to do the next sentence. So, however, okay, so however brings in a point of contrast, right? So I'm like, however,
However,
yeah, like, however, you're like, however, like, some physicists offer a completely different explanation of what mirrors do, suggesting that mirrors actually reverse things front to back. I'm like, okay, now I'm confused, like, not confused in reading comprehension, but confused with, like, how can we have these two completely different explanations? We have physicists saying this and physicists saying this. I'm like, I wonder which one's right. All right, you do the next sentence.
if we place a chair in front of a mirror, we can envision how its reflected image will appear by imagining another chair in the space inside the mirror. So if you put a chair, you basically use your imagination to see how it'll appear as if it were inside, as opposed to like it actually being there. Is that what they're saying? Use your imagination.
Yes. So we're saying like, okay, so we're imagining and rather than the reflection, we're saying, okay, let's take this thing from the front and put it to the back in the mirror, right?
Mhm. Okay. Do I
The,
keep going?
I'm gonna do them. We're gonna rotate now.
Oh,
The
sentences. Okay.
yep, the resulting reflection is identical to and directly facing the original chair. So this explanation, they're saying like whenever I'm envisioning this chair in front of the mirror, I'm envisioning this other mirror, like other chair in the mirror, and they're identical to what you would see inside the mirror. Okay, that makes sense to the original chair.
Mhm. Okay. The most notable thing about this explanation is that it is clearly based on a false premise. The chair inside the mirror is not real, yet the explanation treats it as though it were as real and three-dimensional as the original chair. So what we're seeing inside the mirror isn't real, but basically this explanation treats it as if it were a real three-dimensional chair, but it's not. It's our imagination.
Yes. The most notable thing about this explanation is that it is clearly based on a false premise. And what does a false premise mean? What does that mean?
The reasoning behind that they're giving, it's not
It's
it's incorrect.
based on a false fact or a false assumption, right? Or a false idea.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, you're right. I was just playing, that's an LR thing too. So inside the mirror is not real, yet the explanation treats it as though it were and three-dimensional as the original chair. Excellent. This explanation appeals strongly to many people, however. So this explanation, this front to back explanation appeals strongly to many people because it is quite successful at explaining what a mirror does to a point. Ooh, so I'm guessing that we're saying like people like this explanation. It's like kind of, it sounds like it might be like a quick fix, but it only explains it up to a certain point. And I wonder what that point is.
Hmm. Cool, cool. It seems natural because we are accustomed to dealing with our mental constructs of objects rather than with the primary sense perception on which those constructs are based. Um, so it's natural to us to do this thing, um, mental constructs of objects. Okay, so it seems natural because we're used to seeing things in our minds, the way things are constructed in our minds rather than the way things actually are, primary sense perceptions on which those constructs are based. So it's easier for us to use our imagination than to use, like, to look at things in reality. Is that what they're saying?
I think you're a little stretching it a little bit, but yeah, like we're saying, our mind, we use like the constructs of our mind of like how we envision things. I can't think of the example right now, but like there's certain things that happen that like your brain just fills in even though it doesn't happen. I forget the example. Like I know it's a thing. Rather than like the actual thing that like you said, the actual thing that is happening. And so like the inside, like, if we can't see something, our brains kind of connect the dots for us, even if like how they're connecting the dots isn't the actual thing that's happening, right?
Yeah,
Mine's a complex
like when you're
explanation.
reading.
That's just what I'm bringing in like to think about.
Is it like when you're reading those sentences where it's all jumbled up
Yes,
and but
yes, that's it. Yes, where your brain just fixes
the
it.
top,
Yeah.
yeah, first and the last word or
Mhm.
letter. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's a great example.
Hmm. Where was I? Oh yeah, this explanation appeals. Yep, it seems natural.
Um, sorry, inside the mirror. Oh, sorry. In general, we can safely presume a fairly reliable equation between our perceptions and their associated mental constructs. But mirrors are an exception. So we're saying, although we can normally rely on our perceptions, kind of like you said with the words, like normally we can rely on our words to correct it and it's the right thing. But apparently, mirrors are an exception to this.
Hmm. Okay. They present us with sense perceptions that we naturally construe in a way that is contrary to fact. Okay. So they like basically they give us the real deal, which we change in a way that is contrary to fact. Is that what they're saying? What is the sense perceptions? I'm trying to figure out what that is.
Okay, so what is they referring to?
Um, the scientists,
Mhm.
the physicists, they present us. Oh wait, this explains. Oh, the mirror presents us
Yes.
with the sense.
So mirrors present us with sense perceptions that we naturally construe in a way that is contrary to fact. So the mirrors show us a perception that is different from what is real.
Yes. Okay. So basically, okay, so what we're seeing in the mirror is not what's the real deal. Got it. Okay. But our mind interprets it as if it is.
Well, think about mirrors, right? Like when we look in a mirror, we think it's real because it looks so real, right? Or if we take a snapshot, like a selfie, but it switches, like if it doesn't switch it, like you're perceiving is actually not true, right? Because the
Yeah.
mirror, so we're saying like, but our brains think it's real even though it's not, like the exact right way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's your turn to read.
Yes. Sorry, they indeed. So, like, continuing on to this idea, mirrors are designed to make a two-dimensional surface appear to have depth. Okay, so the mirrors are created to make something that's two-dimensional have depth. I got an easy sentence.
Yeah. Note, for example, that mirrors are among the few objects on which we almost never focus our eyes. Rather, we look into them with our focal lengths adjusted into the imagined space.
So I'm looking into like the because I can see myself on the Zoom right now because I have it minimized. And I'm seeing it. Like I'm not looking into the space itself. Like I'm taking in the picture. That's so weird. Like
Mhm.
In addition to its intuitive appeal, the front to back explanation is motivated in part by the traditional desire in science to separate the observer from the phenomenon or from the event or the thing. Okay, so in addition to its sounding smart appeal, the front to back explanation is being encouraged by or is like being influenced by in part by the traditional desire in science to separate the observer from the actual thing that it's observing or from the thing we're talking about.
So, observer is different from what we're talking about. Yeah, got it. Scientists like to think that what mirrors do should be explainable without referring to what the observer does. So what the mirror actually does is different from what the observer, the person is doing. The person does. Rotating a field of sight, for example. So one way that I was told to look at this is to like remember what we read in the beginning where they talked about do in quotes, referring to the front to back explanation. Is that right?
Scientists like to think about what mirrors do, like to think about what mirrors do should be explainable without reference to what the observer does, e.g., rotating a field of sight. Oh, yes. Okay. So we're referencing back to that field of sight mentioned, which what that wait,
No, the front to back.
rotating. Sorry, this what were you wanting to go back and reference though?
So scientists like to think that what mirrors
Oh, the
do,
do here. Okay.
yeah. So is that what something like that's the type of things that I was like, oh man, if I just paid attention to that, maybe.
I didn't catch it to be honest.
Yeah.
But I think I do.
Okay.
But I don't know but I know what it says like what mirrors do.
Mm-hmm.
Like I guess like I didn't think about it being in hyphens, but I remember that mirrors actually reverse things front to back. Like
Yeah.
Like, I guess, like, I didn't have to go back up there to see that, but, like, I guess, like, I engaged with it, so I knew it, like,
Okay, so it's that engaging, you already know.
yeah,
Okay.
like, I don't overthink stuff like that.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Not
Okay.
that that's bad, like, if you caught that, like, good for you, like, I'm just saying I didn't.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, so what you do, what mirrors do is different from what the observer does. Without referencing, should be explainable without referencing
Yes,
reference to
what we're yes, okay, so that road thing is what it's like. So what it's saying is, like, we should be able to explain the function of mirrors without saying that it's relative to something else,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
However, questions about the appearances of images can be properly answered only if we consider both what mirrors do and what happens when we look into mirrors. So apparently the questions, although the questions about the appearances of images can only be answered if we explain like what mirrors do and what actually happens when we look into the mirrors.
Mhm.
Okay.
So if we remove, so they're just, it's just adding both together, right? To continue
Which
off of
means
what
like,
you
hey, even though
synthesis
scientists
is
wish
solving.
that this wasn't the case, like we do need to be able to, we need both of them to be able to explain what we see when we look into them.
Yeah, synthesizing both. Yeah.
Mhm.
So if we remove the observer from consideration, we are no longer addressing images and appearances because an image entails an observer and a point of view. So if we take out the person, we're no longer addressing images and appearances.
Mhm.
An image entails an observer.
Because the
So
image needs an observer to even know what the image is, right?
yeah, you need the person. Okay.
Excellent. Okay. So I want you to go ahead. How many questions are there? I want you to go ahead and try these questions again, just 20 to 23 on your own. And then we're gonna do them together. I just want to see how you would do after we read it together. And let me and like go ahead if you're narrowing it down to more than like narrowing it down to two, that's totally okay. I just kind of want to go ahead and take like 5 minutes and do, is that okay?
Okay. And it doesn't matter that I've done this question before.
You know, do you remember what the answers are?
Um, Probably not, no.
No,
But
no,
I
I
feel
think
like
that'd be
it'll
really
come
good.
back to me as I'm who knows if it'll come back. Let's see.
Okay, yeah, so go ahead
Um,
and just write them, just write